Sergeant First Class Diana Reeves pulled her truck into the parking lot of the National Guard Armory in Millbrook, Georgia, population 8,000. The building sat on the edge of town, a squat concrete structure that had seen better days. This was her new assignment, a transfer she hadn't requested but had been given anyway. Needed somewhere quiet, her last commander had said, though they both knew the truth. Diana had filed a complaint against a superior officer for sexual harassment. The complaint had been investigated, then quietly buried. Her transfer to this small-town unit was the Army's way of making the problem, meaning her, disappear. She was 42 years old with 20 years of service. She had deployed 3 times to Iraq and twice to Afghanistan. She had trained soldiers, led missions, and earned every promotion through hard work and dedication. None of that seemed to matter now. Diana grabbed her gear bag and walked toward the armory entrance. Inside, she could hear voices, laughter. It was a Saturday morning, drill weekend, when the National Guard soldiers came in for their monthly training. The moment she walked through the door, the conversation stopped. 15 soldiers, mostly men in their 20s and 30s, turned to stare at her. They wore their combat uniforms casually, sleeves rolled up, chatting over coffee. A man in his 50s approached her. He had the bearing of someone who'd been in the military for decades but had never deployed. His name tape read Foster, and his rank was First Sergeant. "Help you?" he asked, looking her up and down. "Sergeant First Class Diana Reeves, reporting for duty." She handed him her orders. Foster took the papers, glanced at them, and frowned. "You're Reeves, they sent a woman." "They sent a soldier with 20 years of experience and 5 combat deployments." "Combat?" One of the younger soldiers laughed. "Doing what, running supply convoys?" Diana turned to look at him. He was maybe 25, fit, with an attitude that screamed, "Never been tested." "Infantry operations specialist. I was with the 101st Airborne." Another soldier snorted. "Women weren't allowed in infantry units 5 years ago, you trying to impress us." "I was a combat medic attached to an infantry unit," Diana said calmly. "I treated casualties under fire, I carried wounded soldiers to safety, and I earned a Bronze Star and a Purple Heart doing it. I'm not trying to impress anyone. I'm here to do my job." Foster handed back her orders. "Fine. Your job is to oversee the medical readiness program. Make sure everyone's medical files are up to date, coordinate training, that sort of thing. Basically, paperwork." "My orders say I'm the new platoon sergeant for 2nd Platoon." "Yeah, well, we've got that covered. Staff Sergeant Miller has been running that platoon just fine. We don't need to shake things up." Diana felt the familiar frustration building. "First Sergeant, with respect, I was assigned to be a platoon sergeant. That's an NCO leadership position, not a desk job." Foster's expression hardened. "Let me be clear, Sergeant Reeves. I don't care what you did in the regular Army. This is a Guard unit. We do things differently here. We're a family, and we don't need some outsider coming in and causing problems." "I'm not here to cause problems." "Good, then you'll do the medical paperwork and stay out of the way." Dismissed. Diana stood there for a moment, every instinct telling her to fight this. But she'd fought before, and it had gotten her exiled to this small-town unit. Fighting again wouldn't change anything. "Yes, First Sergeant," she said quietly. She was shown to a small office in the back of the building, barely bigger than a closet. A desk, a filing cabinet, and a computer that looked 10 years old. Her new kingdom. Through the thin walls, she could hear the soldiers talking. "Can you believe they sent us a woman? And an old one at that. She's got to be in her 40s. Foster will keep her busy with paperwork. She won't bother us. I heard she got transferred here for causing trouble at her last unit. Probably filed some BS complaint because someone told a joke she didn't like." Diana closed the door and sat down at the desk. She had heard it all before. The assumptions, the dismissals, the casual cruelty. It never got easier. She thought about her daughter, Emma, who was 17 now and living with Diana's ex-husband in Tennessee. Emma wanted to join the Army after high school. Diana had tried to talk her out of it. "It's different for women," Diana had told her. "You served, you're a hero," Emma had said. "I'm not a hero, and it's harder than you think." But Emma had her mother's stubbornness. She would probably join anyway. Diana just hoped the Army would be different for her daughter's generation. Over the next few weeks, Diana settled into her role. She updated medical files, scheduled training, and stayed out of everyone's way. She watched 2nd Platoon run drills under Staff Sergeant Miller's leadership and noticed things. Sloppy procedures, poor discipline, soldiers who didn't know basic first aid. She mentioned it to Foster once. "Staff Sergeant Miller is doing fine," Foster had said. "Focus on your own job." Diana focused on her job, but she kept watching. The unit was preparing for their annual training exercise, 2 weeks at Fort Benning where they would qualify on weapons, run tactical scenarios, and be evaluated on their readiness. It was important. Poor performance could affect funding, could affect the unit's reputation. Diana was told she would be staying behind to maintain the armory. "Someone needs to watch the building," Foster said. "That's you." It was a slap in the face. Every soldier went to annual training. Leaving her behind was another way of saying she didn't belong. But 3 days before the unit was scheduled to leave, everything changed. Staff Sergeant Miller got into a car accident. Not serious, but enough to put him in the hospital with a broken leg and concussion. He couldn't deploy. Foster called Diana into his office. "Looks like you're going to Benning after all," he said, clearly unhappy about it. "Miller's out. You'll have to take 2nd Platoon." "I can handle it." "You better. If that platoon fails any evaluations, it's on you. And Reeves, don't try to change everything. Just get them through the basic requirements." "Yes, First Sergeant." Diana left his office and went to find 2nd Platoon. They were in the motor pool, supposed to be conducting vehicle maintenance, but mostly standing around talking. "Listen up," Diana called out. "I'm your platoon sergeant for annual training. We leave in 3 days. I need everyone's gear staged, all vehicle inspections completed, and every soldier qualified on basic first aid by end of drill on Sunday." A soldier named Dalton, one of the loudest mockers from her first day, laughed. "You serious? We've got plans this weekend." "Cancel them. We have work to do." "Miller never made us work this hard." "Miller's in the hospital. I'm here, and we're going to be ready." Dalton stepped closer, using his size to intimidate her. He was 6'2", at least 200 pounds. "What if we don't feel like taking orders from you?" Diana didn't step back. "Then you can explain to the company commander why you're refusing a lawful order from a superior NCO. Your choice." The standoff lasted a few seconds. Then Dalton backed down, but the resentment in his eyes was clear. Over the next 3 days, Diana worked 2nd Platoon hard. She found gaps in their training, deficiencies in their equipment, problems that Miller had been ignoring for months. She fixed what she could and documented what she couldn't. The soldiers complained. They dragged their feet. They did everything half-heartedly. But they did it. On the morning they loaded the buses for Fort Benning, Foster pulled Diana aside. "Remember what I said. Get them through the basics. Don't make waves." "I'll do my job, First Sergeant." "See that you do." Diana climbed onto the bus and took a seat near the front. The soldiers of 2nd Platoon filled the back, talking, laughing, ignoring her. She didn't care. She'd been ignored before. But as the bus pulled away from the armory, heading toward Fort Benning and whatever challenges waited there, Diana felt something she hadn't felt in months. Purpose. She was finally being allowed to lead, and she was going to prove that she deserved to. Even if nobody wanted to believe it. Fort Benning sprawled across the Georgia landscape, thousands of acres dedicated to training soldiers. Diana's unit arrived on a Sunday evening and was assigned to a barracks that had seen better decades. The building smelled of old concrete and countless soldiers who had passed through before them. Diana gathered 2nd Platoon in the day room. "Tomorrow we start qualifications," she told them. "Rifle range in the morning, followed by equipment inspections and tactical exercises. I expect everyone to be up at 500, dressed and ready to move by 5:45. Questions?" Dalton raised his hand mockingly. "Yeah, Sergeant, how come you're pushing us so hard? This is just guard training. It's supposed to be easy." "Nothing about being a soldier is supposed to be easy," Diana said. "And if you think it is, you're not taking it seriously enough." Another soldier, a woman named Martinez who had been friendly but distant, spoke up. "Sergeant Reeves, Miller always let us sleep until 600. Why the change?" "Because 600 doesn't give us enough time to prepare properly. I've seen the schedule. We need to be on the range by 6:30. That means weapons drawn from the armory, magazines loaded, transportation coordinated. We do this right, or we don't do it at all. Grumbling, the platoon dispersed. Diana knew they were talking about her, complaining about her standards. She didn't care. That night, she lay in her bunk in the female barracks and thought about the week ahead. Rifle qualification, first aid testing, land navigation, tactical scenarios. On paper, none of it was particularly difficult, but she had watched this platoon train. They were sloppy, undisciplined, overconfident. They were going to fail unless she pushed them to be better. The next morning, half the platoon was late to formation. Diana made them do push-ups, which earned her more resentment. At the rifle range, things got worse. The soldiers were supposed to qualify with their M4 rifles, hit a certain number of targets at various distances to prove basic marksmanship. It was standard training that every soldier should be able to pass. But as Diana watched 2nd Platoon shoot, she realized how unprepared they were. Dalton missed half his targets. Martinez barely qualified. 3 soldiers failed completely. Diana pulled each failure aside and worked with them individually. She checked their rifle sights, corrected their stance, coached their breathing. By the end of the day, 2 of the 3 passed on their 2nd attempt. But Private First Class Jensen, a 19-year-old who had joined the Guard to pay for college, still couldn't hit the targets. "I don't understand," Jensen said, frustrated. "I've shot before, I passed basic training." Diana watched him shoot and saw the problem immediately. "You're flinching, anticipating the recoil. Every time you pull the trigger, you tense up." "I can't help it." "Yes, you can. Try this." Diana demonstrated, squeezing the trigger smoothly, letting the rifle's natural recoil happen without fighting it. "Don't anticipate. Just focus on the target and let the shot surprise you." Jensen tried again. This time he hit 3 out of 5 targets. "Better," Diana said. "Keep practicing, you'll get it." By the end of the range day, 2nd Platoon had a 90% qualification rate. It was acceptable, but Diana knew they could do better. That evening, First Sergeant Foster approached her at the chow hall. "Heard your platoon had some failures at the range." 3 initial failures, 2 passed on requalification. Jensen needs more practice. Miller's platoon usually has a 100% pass rate. Diana looked at him steadily. Or did Miller just sign off on everyone regardless of their actual scores? Foster's face reddened. "That's a serious accusation." "It's a serious problem. Half this platoon isn't properly trained. They've been passing evaluations for months, maybe years, without actually meeting standards." "You've been here less than a month. You don't know." "I know what I see. I know that soldiers who can't shoot straight, can't perform first aid, and can't navigate using a map and compass are going to get themselves or others killed if they're ever called to real service. This is the National Guard, not active duty. We're not going to combat. Tell that to the Guard units that deployed to Iraq and Afghanistan. Tell that to the soldiers who responded to Hurricane Katrina or the California wildfires. Just because we're Guard doesn't mean we're not real soldiers." Foster stepped closer, his voice low and angry. "You're making enemies, Reeves. You're making my job harder." Miller knew how to keep everyone happy. "I'm not here to make people happy. I'm here to make them ready." Foster walked away without another word. Over the next few days, Diana pushed 2nd Platoon harder than they'd ever been pushed. She ran them through first aid drills until they could apply tourniquets and treat sucking chest wounds in their sleep. She took them on land navigation courses through the woods, teaching them to read terrain and trust their compasses. Some soldiers began to respond. Martinez started showing real leadership potential, helping the weaker soldiers instead of mocking them. Even Dalton, though he still complained, started putting in effort. But the resentment remained. Diana heard the whispers, saw the eye rolls when she gave orders. She was the outsider, the hardess, the woman who thought she was better than everyone else. On Thursday, the tactical exercise began. 2nd Platoon was assigned to conduct a simulated patrol, identify enemy positions, and call in a medical evacuation for a casualty. It tested leadership, communication, tactical awareness, and medical skills. Diana briefed her platoon carefully, assigned roles, and made sure everyone understood the mission. "Dalton, your team leader. Martinez, your medic. Jensen, your radio operator. Everyone else, stay alert and follow Dalton's orders. I'll be observing, but this is your mission. Show me what you can do." The exercise started well. The platoon moved through the woods with decent spacing and noise discipline. Dalton called out hand signals when they needed to stop or change direction. Then the ambush happened. The evaluators triggered simulated gunfire and threw smoke grenades. In the chaos, one soldier was designated as a casualty, a sucking chest wound from simulated shrapnel. "Medic," Dalton yelled. "Martinez, get over here." Martinez ran to the casualty and froze. The wounded soldier was lying on the ground, the evaluator standing over him describing the injury. Martinez pulled out her aid bag, but her hands were shaking. I don't remember. The chest seal, where's the chest seal?" Diana watched from 20 feet away, every instinct screaming at her to intervene. But this was their test. They had to figure it out. "Martinez," Dalton shouted. "Focus, you know this." Martinez took a breath and started going through her training. She found the chest seal, applied it correctly, checked for exit wounds, and stabilized the patient. "Jensen, call for medevac," Dalton ordered. Jensen grabbed the radio and stammered through the call, messing up the grid coordinates twice before getting them right. It was messy, it was chaotic, but they completed the mission. After the exercise, the evaluator gathered second platoon for feedback. "That was rough," he said. "Your medic panicked, your radio operator couldn't get the coordinates right, and your team leader lost control of half the squad. In a real situation, that casualty might have died." The platoon looked defeated. Then the evaluator smiled. "But you pulled it together. You completed the mission. And honestly, considering what I've heard about this platoon's previous performance, you did a lot better than expected. Your platoon sergeant has been doing good work with you." Some soldiers glanced at Diana. She saw surprise in their faces, as if they hadn't expected her to actually help them. That night, Martinez approached Diana in the barracks. "Sergeant Reeves, can I talk to you?" "Of course." "I wanted to apologize. When you first showed up, I thought you were just going to be another problem. Another person coming in and stirring things up. But you actually taught me things this week. You made me better, so thank you." Diana felt emotion tighten her throat. "You did the work, Martinez. I just pointed you in the right direction." "Still, I appreciate it, and I'm sorry I didn't give you a chance at first." After Martinez left, Diana sat on her bunk and allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. She was getting through to them. Slowly, maybe, but it was happening. The next day was the final evaluation, a 12-mile ruck march carrying 50 pounds of gear. Every soldier had to complete it within 3 hours to pass. Diana led from the front, setting the pace. Her legs ached and her back screamed from the weight of the rucksack, but she kept moving. Second platoon followed. Some struggled. Some fell behind. But Diana rotated back through the formation, encouraging them, redistributing weight from those who were struggling, keeping everyone moving. With 15 minutes to spare, second platoon crossed the finish line. Every soldier passed. First Sergeant Foster was waiting at the finish line. He looked at Diana with an expression she couldn't quite read. "Not bad, Reeves, not bad at all." It wasn't praise, exactly, but it wasn't criticism either. Diana allowed herself a small smile. They had done it. Second platoon had passed annual training, and maybe, just maybe, she had earned a small measure of respect. But as the unit packed up to head home the next day, Diana noticed something odd. Foster was in a heated conversation with the company commander, Captain Wells. Both men kept glancing at Diana. Something was wrong. The unit returned to Millbrook on Saturday afternoon. Soldiers unloaded gear, turned in weapons, and headed home to their families. Diana stayed late, making sure everything was properly accounted for and secured. It was her job as platoon sergeant, and she took it seriously. First Sergeant Foster approached her as she was locking up the arms room. "Reeves, Captain Wells wants to see you in his office. Monday morning, 800. "What's this about?" "You'll find out Monday." Foster walked away before Diana could ask more questions. Sunday dragged by. Diana tried to distract herself with errands, calling her daughter, cleaning her small rental house on the edge of town. But the worry gnawed at her. What had she done wrong? Had she pushed second platoon too hard? Had someone filed a complaint about her? Monday morning, Diana arrived at the armory at 7:30. She changed into her uniform and waited in the small office that had been assigned to her. At 7:55, she walked to Captain Wells's office and knocked. Come in. Captain Michael Wells was in his early 40s, a lawyer in civilian life who led the Guard unit as his part-time military service. He was polished, professional, and generally well-liked. But this morning, he looked uncomfortable. Sergeant Reeves, have a seat. Diana sat. Foster was already in the room, standing against the wall with his arms crossed. Wells pulled out a folder. I've received a complaint about your conduct during annual training. Diana's stomach dropped. A complaint from who? That's confidential, but the allegations are serious. You're accused of creating a hostile environment, showing favoritism to female soldiers, and belittling male soldiers who didn't meet your standards. That's not true. The complaint says you made Specialist Dalton do excessive physical training as punishment for questioning your orders. Is that accurate? Dalton and several other soldiers were late to formation. I assigned corrective physical training, which is standard procedure. The complaint also says you publicly humiliated soldiers who failed rifle qualifications. I worked one-on-one with soldiers who failed, helping them improve their scores. There was nothing humiliating about it. Wells looked at his papers. There's also an allegation that you told First Sergeant Foster that Staff Sergeant Miller had been falsifying training records. Diana glanced at Foster, who looked away. I expressed concern that soldiers were passing evaluations without actually meeting the standards. That's not the same as accusing anyone of falsifying records. But you did question the integrity of this unit's training program. I questioned whether our soldiers were properly prepared. And considering that 2nd Platoon had a 70% initial failure rate at the rifle range, I'd say my concerns were valid. Wells closed the folder. Sergeant Reeves, I'm going to be frank with you. This unit functioned well before you arrived. Staff Sergeant Miller ran 2nd Platoon for 3 years without any problems. Now you've been here a month and I'm getting complaints. Captain, with respect, no problems doesn't mean the unit was functioning well. It might just mean nobody was paying attention to the real issues. Foster spoke up. There she goes again, accusing everyone of incompetence. I'm not accusing anyone of anything except complacency, Diana said, her voice rising slightly. I'm saying that we have soldiers who weren't properly trained, and instead of fixing the problem, you're blaming me for pointing it out. Wells held up his hand. That's enough. Sergeant Reeves, I'm going to conduct an investigation into these complaints. Until it's complete, you're relieved of your duties as platoon sergeant. You'll return to medical administration work. Sir, you're punishing me for doing my job. I'm following proper procedure when a complaint is filed. If the investigation clears you, you'll be reinstated. Diana stood. May I ask who filed the complaint? As I said, that's confidential. Was it Dalton, Foster? Wells's expression told her she was close. Dismissed, Sergeant. Diana left the office feeling like she'd been punched in the gut. She had worked so hard, had gotten 2nd Platoon through training, had started to earn their respect. And now she was being pushed aside again. She went to her small office and started packing her things. There wasn't much. A few manuals, some personal photos, her coffee mug. Martinez appeared in the doorway. Sergeant Reeves, is it true you're being investigated? Word travels fast. Dalton's bragging about it. Says he filed a complaint because you were too hard on everyone. Diana wasn't surprised. He's entitled to his opinion. But it's not fair. You helped us. You made us better soldiers. Thank you for saying that. Martinez hesitated. Some of us want to write statements supporting you for the investigation. I appreciate that, but be careful. Foster and Wells aren't happy with me. Supporting me might cause problems for you. I don't care, you stood up for us. Now we'll stand up for you. After Martinez left, Diana sat in the quiet office and tried to process what was happening. This was exactly what had happened at her last unit. She had stood up for what was right, and she had been punished for it. The investigation dragged on for 2 weeks. Diana was interviewed multiple times. She provided detailed accounts of everything she had done during annual training. She explained her training methods, her standards, her decisions. Wells interviewed other soldiers too. Martinez and several others gave statements supporting Diana, but Dalton and a few of his friends backed up the complaint. Finally, on a Friday afternoon, Wells called Diana back to his office. The investigation is complete, he said. I've reviewed all the statements and evidence. While I don't find that you violated any specific regulations, I do think your leadership style was too aggressive for this unit. The National Guard is different from active duty. You need to adjust your expectations. So I'm being blamed for having standards. You're being counseled to be more flexible. I'm reinstating you as platoon sergeant, but with the understanding that you'll take a softer approach. Diana felt anger burning in her chest. And if I don't agree with that approach, then you'll find yourself back on medical administration, permanently. It was a clear threat. Comply or be sidelined. I understand, sir. Good, dismissed. Diana left the office and walked to her truck. She sat in the driver's seat, gripping the steering wheel, fighting back tears of frustration. 20 years she had served. 20 years of following orders, of sacrificing, of being the best soldier she could be. And it didn't matter. Every time she tried to lead, tried to make a difference, she was pushed down. She was about to start the truck when her phone rang. An unknown number. Hello? Sergeant Reeves, this is Colonel Patricia Morrison from the Georgia National Guard headquarters. I need to speak with you about a situation at your unit. Diana's heart started racing. Ma'am, I've received some concerning information about training deficiencies in your unit, possibly falsified records. I'm launching a formal investigation and I need your cooperation. Can you come to Atlanta tomorrow? Yes, ma'am, absolutely. After the call ended, Diana sat in stunned silence. Someone had reported the problems to higher headquarters. Someone had decided that the truth mattered more than protecting the unit's reputation. She had a feeling she knew who. The next day, Diana drove to Atlanta and spent 4 hours with Colonel Morrison and her investigation team. She told them everything: the sloppy training, the failures that had been covered up, Foster's hostility, Wells's refusal to address the real problems. Do you have any documentation? Morrison asked. I kept copies of all my training records from annual training. Qualification scores, exercise evaluations, everything. I'll need all of it. Diana provided everything she had. Then Morrison asked the question Diana had been waiting for. Sergeant Reeves, why didn't you report these problems earlier? I tried, ma'am. I told First Sergeant Foster. I expressed concerns to Captain Wells. They didn't want to hear it. And when they retaliated against you with this bogus complaint, why didn't you go to higher headquarters yourself? Diana paused. Because I've learned that reporting problems usually just creates more problems for me. I've been punished for speaking up before. I didn't want to go through that again. Morrison's expression softened. That's unacceptable. You should never be punished for maintaining standards and doing your job with integrity. That stops now. Over the next week, Morrison's team descended on the Millbrook Armory. They interviewed soldiers, reviewed records, and uncovered a pattern of falsified training reports going back 3 years. Staff Sergeant Miller had been signing off on qualifications that soldiers hadn't actually passed. First Sergeant Foster had been approving the reports without verifying them. Captain Wells had been either willfully ignorant or complicit. The soldiers had been promoted, given awards, and advanced in their careers based on fake achievements. And Diana had been punished for trying to fix it. On a Thursday afternoon, Colonel Morrison held a mandatory formation at the armory. Every soldier in the unit was required to attend. Diana stood in the back, uncertain what was about to happen. Morrison addressed the formation, her voice carrying authority. I am here to inform you that this unit has failed its annual training evaluation. Based on the investigation, we have found systemic failures in training, leadership, and integrity. The formation shifted uncomfortably. First Sergeant Foster and Staff Sergeant Miller are being relieved of duty and face possible court-martial for falsifying records. Captain Wells is being removed from command pending further investigation. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the formation. Effective immediately, this unit will undergo remedial training. Every soldier will be retested on basic qualifications. Anyone who fails will be required to complete additional training until they meet the standard. Morrison paused. I also want to address the treatment of Sergeant First Class Diana Reeves. Diana's heart stopped. Sergeant Reeves attempted to correct training deficiencies and was retaliated against for her efforts. She maintained her integrity in the face of pressure to compromise. She is exactly the kind of leader this unit needs. Morrison looked directly at Diana. Sergeant Reeves front and center. Diana walked forward, her mind reeling. Sergeant Reeves, you are hereby promoted to Master Sergeant and assigned as the acting first sergeant of this unit. You will oversee the remedial training and ensure that every soldier in this formation meets the standards we expect. Do you accept? Diana stood at attention, her voice strong. Yes, ma'am. Outstanding. This formation is dismissed. As the soldiers dispersed, several approached Diana, Martinez, Jensen, even some who had doubted her. They shook her hand, apologized, thanked her. But Dalton stood in the corner, glaring at her with pure hatred. Diana noticed, and something told her this wasn't over. Not yet. Diana threw herself into rebuilding the unit. Over the next 6 weeks, she worked 12-hour days, retraining soldiers, updating records, fixing years of negligence. It was exhausting, but it was also satisfying. She was finally able to lead the way she knew was right. Most soldiers responded well. They appreciated the clear standards, the honest feedback, the sense that they were becoming real soldiers instead of just playing at it. But a small group, led by Dalton, resisted every step of the way. Dalton had been close friends with Staff Sergeant Miller. He had benefited from the old system where standards didn't matter. Now he was being held accountable, and he hated Diana for it. She's ruining this unit, Diana heard him tell other soldiers. We used to have fun, now it's all about her and her stupid standards. Diana documented every instance of resistance, every failure to follow orders, every attempt to undermine her authority. She was building a case, doing everything by the book. On a cold November morning, Diana arrived at the armory to find graffiti spray-painted on the building wall. "REVS is a bitch." She photographed it and filed a report. When Colonel Morrison heard about it, she was furious and ordered an investigation. But there were no witnesses, no cameras in that area. Whoever did it had been careful. Diana knew it was Dalton, she just couldn't prove it. A week later, during a night training exercise, Diana's vehicle developed brake problems. When the mechanics investigated, they found that the brake line had been cut, not completely, but enough that it would fail under pressure. "This is sabotage," the head mechanic told Diana. "If you'd been driving faster or on a hill, you could have been killed." Another report, another investigation, still no proof. Diana started watching her back. She varied her routines, checked her equipment twice, never went anywhere alone on the armory grounds. Martinez pulled her aside one evening. "Sergeant, some of us are worried. Dalton's talking crazy, saying you've destroyed people's careers, that someone needs to teach you a lesson." "Has he made any specific threats?" "Nothing we could report, but the way he says it, I think he's dangerous." Diana reported it to Colonel Morrison, who ordered Dalton to undergo a psychological evaluation. He passed. He was smart enough to hide his rage when it mattered. But Diana could see it in his eyes every time they crossed paths. In early December, the unit was scheduled for a formal ceremony. Colonel Morrison was coming to officially install the new commander, a solid officer named Captain Rodriguez who had been thoroughly vetted. It was a fresh start for the unit, a chance to turn the page on the scandal. Diana was asked to speak at the ceremony about the unit's transformation. She worked on her speech for days, wanting to strike the right tone, acknowledging the problems while celebrating the improvements. The ceremony was scheduled for a Saturday morning. The entire unit would attend, along with local officials, families, and press. It was important, symbolic. On Friday night, Diana stayed late at the armory, finalizing preparations. She was alone in the building, or so she thought. She was in her office when she heard footsteps in the hallway. "Hello," she called out. Dalton appeared in her doorway. He was in civilian clothes, which meant he wasn't supposed to be there. "Dalton, what are you doing here?" "I wanted to talk to you, away from everyone else." Diana's instincts screamed danger. She kept her desk between them. "If you have something to say, you can say it at the ceremony tomorrow." "No, I can't, because you're not going to be at that ceremony." He pulled out a gun. Diana's training took over. She assessed the situation in a fraction of a second. Dalton was blocking the door, which was the only exit from her office. He had a 9 pistol, probably his personal weapon. His hands were shaking slightly. He was nervous, which made him more dangerous. Dalton put the gun down. Whatever you're angry about, this isn't the answer. You destroyed everything. His voice was rising, breaking. Miller was like a father to me. Foster was my friend, and you got them court-martialed. You took everything away from them. They falsified records. They failed to train soldiers properly. What happened to them was their own doing. That's bullshit. We were fine until you showed up. You and your stupid standards, your need to prove how tough you are. You're just a bitter woman who hates men. Diana kept her voice calm. I don't hate anyone. I just expect soldiers to be ready for what they signed up to do. Well, you won't be expecting this. Dalton raised the gun, pointing it at Diana's chest. In that split second, Diana made a decision. She dove to her left behind the filing cabinet just as Dalton fired. The bullet hit the wall behind where she'd been standing. Diana's own weapon, a Beretta M9 she was authorized to carry as part of her duties, was in her desk drawer. She yanked it open, grabbed the pistol, chambered a round. Dalton fired again. The bullet hit the filing cabinet inches from Diana's head. She rolled, came up in a shooting stance, and fired twice. Both bullets hit Dalton in the center mass. He dropped, the gun falling from his hand. Diana kicked his weapon away, then checked his pulse. He was alive, barely, blood spreading across his chest. She grabbed her radio. This is Master Sergeant Reeves. Shots fired at the armory. I need police and ambulance immediately. One person down with gunshot wounds. Then she applied pressure to Dalton's wounds, trying to keep him alive even though he had just tried to kill her. Because that's what soldiers do. They save lives, even the lives of those who hate them. The ceremony the next morning was postponed while police investigated the shooting. Diana was questioned for hours. The evidence was clear. Dalton had entered the building illegally, brought a weapon, fired first. It was self-defense. But Diana was wounded too, not physically but emotionally. She had killed before in combat overseas, but this was different. This was a soldier from her own unit, someone she had tried to help become better. Dalton survived surgery and was arrested. He would face attempted murder charges, along with military prosecution. His life was over, and Diana couldn't help feeling sad about that. On a cold Monday morning 2 weeks later, the ceremony finally took place. Diana arrived in her dress uniform, her medals displayed on her chest, including a new one awarded for her actions in stopping Dalton. The room was packed. Soldiers, officials, families, press. Everyone had heard about what happened. Diana could feel their eyes on her as she entered. She walked to the front of the room and stood beside Colonel Morrison, waiting for the ceremony to begin. Then the doors at the back of the room opened. Diana turned and saw a sight that made her breath catch. Walking through the door, using a cane but moving under her own power, was Emma, her daughter, who was supposed to be in Tennessee. Behind Emma came Diana's ex-husband, her parents, her sister, family she hadn't seen in over a year. And behind them, dozens of soldiers from Diana's previous units, people she had served with, led, trained. They had driven from all over the country to be here. The room fell silent as they filed in, finding seats, all of them wearing their uniforms or veterans' caps. Diana felt tears sting her eyes. Colonel Morrison stepped to the podium and began to speak. We're here today to recognize Master Sergeant Diana Reeves for 20 years of exceptional service to our nation. But we're also here to acknowledge something more important. Master Sergeant Reeves represents the very best of what it means to be a soldier. She stands for integrity, even when it costs her. She maintains standards, even when she's punished for it. She protects others, even at risk to herself. Morrison paused. 2 weeks ago, Master Sergeant Reeves faced a deadly threat in this very building. She responded with courage and skill, protecting not only herself but potentially preventing a mass casualty event at our ceremony. She is a hero, but more than that, she is the kind of leader every unit should be lucky enough to have. Morrison turned to Diana. Master Sergeant Reeves, it is my honor to present you with the Soldier's Medal for heroism not involving actual conflict with an enemy. The room erupted in applause. Diana stood at attention as Morrison pinned the medal to her uniform. Then Emma stood up and started clapping. The other family members joined her. The soldiers from her previous unit stood. Then Martinez and the soldiers from 2nd Platoon. Soon the entire room was on their feet, applauding, some crying, all of them honoring the woman who had refused to quit. Diana saluted the crowd, tears streaming down her face now. After the ceremony, Emma ran to her mother and hugged her tight. "I'm so proud of you, Mom. You're my hero." Diana held her daughter close. "I was trying to protect you from all this, from how hard it is. I know, but you also showed me that it's worth it. That standing up for what's right matters even when it's hard, especially when it's hard." Diana's ex-husband approached, awkward but sincere. "You've always been the strongest person I know, Diana. I'm sorry I didn't appreciate that when we were married." Her parents, both retired military themselves, shook her hand with pride in their eyes. And one by one, the soldiers from her past came up to thank her, to tell her what she had meant to them, how she had made them better. Martinez was the last to approach. Master Sergeant, I want you to know something. I'm putting in a packet to go active duty, to make the Army my career, and it's because of you. You showed me what leadership really means." Diana smiled through her tears. "You're going to be an outstanding soldier, Martinez. I learned from the best." As the crowd dispersed, Diana stood alone for a moment in the ceremony room. She thought about the journey that had brought her here. The insults, the mockery, the underestimation. The times she had been pushed aside, punished for doing right, told she didn't belong. And she thought about walking into that room wounded, not physically this time, but emotionally scarred from years of fighting battles that seemed impossible to win. But she had walked in armed too, armed with integrity, with courage, with the absolute certainty that she was doing the right thing. And when she had stood before them all, the noise of doubt and discrimination had died, replaced with respect, with honor, with recognition that she was exactly who she had always claimed to be. A soldier, a leader, a hero. Master Sergeant Diana Reeves had proven that courage isn't about being the biggest or the loudest. It's about being the one who stands up when everyone else sits down. The one who speaks truth when everyone else stays silent. The one who refuses to quit, no matter how many times she's knocked down. She had silenced the room with her strength. And in doing so, she had inspired a new generation of soldiers, including her own daughter, to believe that they could do the same. That was the real victory. And it was worth every battle she had fought to get there.